Panic in the woods. The panic in the woods phenomenon is a strange phenomenon, typically experienced by hikers or anyone venturing into the wilderness. Those who have experienced this phenomenon describe a sudden, irrational wave of intense primal fear or panic, often accompanied by the sensation of being watched. In these moments, the forest becomes eerily silent. The usual sounds of nature, like birds chirping, vanish, and the air feels still. Sometimes, people also experience a ringing or buzzing sound in their ears. In response to this overwhelming fear, individuals often find themselves running blindly through the woods and getting lost. There are several possible explanations for this phenomenon. One theory suggests that it may be connected to the primal nature spirit of the forest, specifically the Greek god Pan, who is known for his chaotic nature and for leading people astray by inducing irrational fear in them, with the name of the Greek god Pan being the origin of the word panic. Another more scientific explanation compares it to the call of the void, an unexplained sudden urge to jump from a great height, which could be linked to an instinctual response to the environment. Hoia Baciu Forest. Said to be one of the most haunted forests in the world, Romania's Hoia Baciu Forest is surrounded by countless myths, urban legends, and ghost stories. According to legend, its name is believed to have originated from a shepherd who mysteriously disappeared, along with his flock of 200 sheep in the forest. Various strange lights, orbs, and UFOs have allegedly been observed in the forest, particularly over its infamous clearing. In 1968, military technician Emil Barnia reportedly photographed a UFO he witnessed hovering over the forest. One of the most infamous legends is the disappearance of a 5-year-old girl who ventured into the forest. A search party was launched, but no trace of the girl was found. She reappeared 5 years later with no recollection of the time she had been missing. Remarkably, she was unharmed and otherwise healthy. Some accounts claim that she hadn't aged a day, while others claim that she had aged normally, with the same clothes she disappeared in now stretched tight over her frame. Reports of enigmatic disappearances in the forest are numerous. Visitors claim to experience strange symptoms, such as migraines, nausea, rashes, along with unexplained burn marks and scratches on their bodies, and a general sense of being watched. The trees in the forest grow in bizarre shapes and patterns, producing eerie sounds when the wind passes through them. In the middle of the forest, there's a peculiar clearing where reportedly no vegetation grows. This clearing is said to be a place where the boundaries between worlds are thin, with many people allegedly observing shadowy human-like figures within it. Strange lights have also been seen at the forest's edge, believed to be the spirits of farmers who disappeared there long ago. Despite these captivating stories and legends surrounding the forest, most, if not all, are likely exaggerations, if not outright legends. These tales have been fueled by various ghost hunting documentaries filmed in the forest. Feral people. The theory of feral people is one that gained traction on social media in 2021, specifically on TikTok, although the rumor itself has been around for some time before that. The theory states that due to the large, undiscovered nature of national parks, there are feral people living in these areas, specifically in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. These feral people are said to be responsible for the people who go missing, preying on these victims. There are also claims that the government refuses to investigate the hundreds of eyewitness accounts of feral humans in these parks. The main basis for this theory is the disappearance of Dennis Lloyd Martin. On June 14, 1969, 6-year-old Dennis Lloyd Martin was visiting the Great Smoky Mountains National Park with his father William Martin, his grandfather Clyde, and his older brother Douglas. They hiked from Cades Cove to Russell Field and camped overnight. The following day, they hiked to Spencefield near the Appalachian Trail, where they met another family with young boys. Late in the afternoon, Dennis, his brother, and the other boys decided to play a prank on the adults. 3 of the boys went one way, while Dennis went the other way to hide behind a bush. The 3 boys surprised the adults, but Dennis was nowhere to be found. After about 5 minutes, when Dennis didn't pop out, his father William hurried to look for him. He ran down the trail for nearly 2 miles. When William was sure Dennis couldn't have gone farther, he sought the help of the National Park Service rangers. Over the next week, the search party grew, attracting National Guard units, Boy Scouts, and Green Berets. Heavy rains on the first day of the search and heavy mist hampered the efforts. The only clue found was child-sized footprints in the area, leading to a stream where they disappeared. One of the footprints was barefoot, while the other seemed to be wearing a shoe similar to the ones Dennis wore. However, park officials determined that the footprints were left by Boy Scouts assisting in the search. None of the Boy Scouts, however, had been searching the area barefoot. The search was abandoned on June 29 and officially closed on September 14, becoming the largest search in the park's history. Several miles from where Dennis had gone missing, a family had been looking for wildlife. Weeks after Dennis's disappearance, when the father, Harold Key, learned about the search, he called officials and reported hearing an enormous, sickening scream, shortly before witnessing an unkempt, shaggy, rough-looking man running up the trail where the scream came from. Harold claims that the sighting occurred roughly an hour after Dennis's disappearance. However, park rangers and the FBI concluded that there was insufficient evidence to link the sighting to Dennis's disappearance. Following this, many people theorized that Dennis had been abducted by a feral man, and that these feral people were responsible for many of the missing children cases. However, the dangerous wildlife, heavy rains, low temperatures, and other factors are far more plausible explanation for Dennis's disappearance than feral humans, a theory that lacks much basis. Many Appalachian locals have criticized the claims of the existence of feral people, arguing that the locals make use of the natural resources with no need to harm other humans. They also point out that such claims demonize impoverished locals who may not have as much access to resources compared to other parts of the country. Orbs in the Woods. Many people have reported seeing orbs in the woods or other rural areas. These reports describe the orbs as glowing and floating, with the orbs seemingly behaving like living entities, moving on their own, sometimes in unusual patterns. The orbs glow in different colors, such as blue, green, or orange, and if you're close enough, they seem to emit a kind of buzzing or ringing sound. The orbs appear to be harmless in most cases, just hovering around in the area. Some people are convinced that the orbs are manifestations of angels or even nature spirits, while others claim that the orbs are actually UFOs, or interdimensional beings. More scientific explanations range from ball lightning, a poorly understood phenomenon involving glowing balls of light that typically occur during thunderstorms, to swamp gas, especially in areas with marshes and swamps. Swamp gas is a mixture of methane and other gases released by decaying organic matter. It can ignite spontaneously, creating a glowing ball of light that can be mistaken for these orbs, although the true nature of these orbs remains a mystery. Lost or missing time in the woods. The phenomenon of lost or missing time refers to a situation where a person experiences a period of time they cannot account for or remember. This phenomenon has been reported by many alleged UFO abductees, although not always directly. Many of these abductees claim to have no memory of the details of their abductions, with some even having strange markings on their bodies, but no recollection of how they got them. In other cases, there are those who believe they have been missing for only a few minutes, only to later discover that they have been gone for hours, with no explanation to account for the missing time. Missing time is not limited to UFO abductions. Many people who have gone and lost in the woods, or been out hiking, have also claimed to experience this phenomenon. It happens to one person or a group, and while out in the woods, they are suddenly greeted with absolute silence. Hours pass, but to the missing person, it feels like only minutes. The person experiencing missing time is often unable to be found by those searching for them, even though they insist they have stayed in the same area. When they suddenly reappear, it seems to those searching as though they've been hiding or avoiding their calls, but this is not the case. Many proposed explanations for this phenomenon exist, ranging from memory wipes during UFO abductions to dimensional shifts. A more plausible explanation is that extreme stress or anxiety while out in the woods could cause a blackout, during which the person is unable to remember what happened while they were unconscious. Another potential explanation is transient global amnesia, TGA. TGA is a neurological disorder in which there is a disruption of short-term memory. During an episode of TGA, which typically lasts for a few hours, a person is unable to create new memories, so the memory of recent events disappears. However, The person typically has no issues with their self-identity and remains mentally alert. The exact cause of TGA is still unknown. However, it may be caused by emotional or psychological stress. Stairs in the Woods. The story of the mysterious staircases in the woods first gained attention on Reddit's No Sleep Search and Rescue Officer series, where a narrator, claiming to be a search and rescue officer, shared unsettling tales. These stories often revolved around lone staircases found deep in the woods, which are said to possess supernatural qualities. The narrator warns, if you ever come across a set of stairs in the woods, do not climb them, do not touch them, and do not approach them. In one tale, the narrator describes climbing a set of stairs, only to find complete silence at the top. The forest around him seemed frozen, unnervingly still. When he descended, he was shocked to learn that his colleagues had been searching for him for hours, though he had only been on the stairs for a few minutes. Oddly, they had even passed by the stairs multiple times without noticing him. Another story involves a detached hand found in a tree trunk by a lumber company working in a national park. The strange discovery was eventually tied to the staircase phenomenon. In this case, a man had climbed the stairs, and after reaching the top, extended his hand beyond the boundary. Suddenly his hand was severed at the wrist, disappearing completely, leaving only a stump behind. It's speculated that the hand found in the tree belonged to this man. One recurring feature of these mysterious staircases is their ability to teleport people to random locations. This phenomenon has been used to explain the strange disappearances of children and adults, who are later found in completely unexpected places. Witnesses claim that after reaching the top of the stairs, they were suddenly transported elsewhere. While most of these stories are fictional, there have been actual reports of staircases appearing in remote wooded areas. These are generally believed to be the remains of buildings that were torn down, with the stairs being the only part left standing. While the viral photo usually shared with these photos is that of a statue by artist Bruce Allen, named Observatory, erected in the Forest of Dean in Gloucestershire in 1988. The statue was removed in 2014 after incurring structural damage. 7 Gates of Hell. There exists an urban legend in Hallam Township, York County, Pennsylvania. According to the legend, there are 7 gates in a wooded area in Hallam Township, and passing through all 7 gates will lead a person straight to hell. There are 2 versions of the story explaining why the gates exist. One version states that a mental institution used to be located on the outskirts of town, designed to isolate people deemed insane from the rest of the population. One day, in the 1900s, a fire broke out in the asylum. Since it was in a remote part of town, firefighters couldn't reach it in time. Many of the patients died in the flames, while those who managed to escape were reportedly beaten to death. Some say that the gates were erected by the local search party to trap the remaining inmates. Another version of the legend claims that a physician living on the property built several gates along a path deep into the forest. Both versions agree that only one gate is visible in the morning, while the other 6 can only be seen at night. No one has allegedly gone past the 5th gate. In reality, the location never housed an institution in the first place. The property is privately owned, with only one gate constructed to keep out trespassers attracted by the legend. Due to the popularity of the myth and the disturbance it caused among local residents, the township's own website has debunked the myth. Devil's Tramping Grounds. Located in Bear Creek, North Carolina, the Devil's Tramping Ground is a circular clearing devoid of vegetation. It's a popular camping spot surrounded by various legends and tales. Urban legends claim that anything left overnight in this patch of ground disappears the next day, no matter how heavy. Dogs reportedly begin barking and howling in its proximity, refusing to go near it, and other animals allegedly avoid crossing the ring altogether. It's said that for almost 100 years, no vegetation has grown in the circle, and nothing is able to grow there. Those who have camped in the area overnight have reported strange phenomena, such as the sound of footsteps at night. According to local legend, the Devil's Tramping Ground earned its name because it is believed to be where the devil walks around in circles on certain nights, contemplating new evils to bring to humanity and the world. Wendigo Psychosis. In the spiritual traditions of the Algonquian people, Wendigos are malevolent spirits believed to possess individuals during times of weakness or due to excessive greed and starvation. Some traditions hold that Wendigos possess those who resort to cannibalism during times of scarcity, punishing their lack of self-discipline by transforming them into supernatural creatures with an insatiable appetite for human flesh. The more they consume, the more they grow, with their hunger never being satisfied. This pervasive cultural belief has given rise to a rare and unique form of mental disorder or psychosis, observed among Algonquian-speaking people who share these beliefs, which was dubbed Wendigo Psychosis by Oblate missionary J.E. Sandon, who worked with the Cree community in the 1920s. Those experiencing this disorder believe they are transforming into the supernatural Wendigo, feeling a compelling urge to consume human flesh, alongside additional symptoms of paranoia, anxiety, and a sense of impending doom. Another explanation for this phenomenon suggests that it has been widely misreported. Cultural beliefs, fears, and anxieties, especially during times of starvation and famine, may have led individuals to resort to cannibalism for survival. As a result, the community, driven by collective fear of the Wendigo, may have shunned and punished those involved in such acts, much like the witch hunts of medieval Europe. Gnawed deer. The gnawed deer is a creature said to inhabit the Appalachian Mountains. It's described as looking like a deer from a distance, but once it gets closer, something about it seems off, particularly its anatomy and behavior. Many accounts describe it as looking almost like a deer, but not quite. The most defining feature of these creatures is that their eyes are situated at the front of their head, like a predator, rather than on the sides, where they would normally be. Their movements are also strange, as if they have additional joints on their limbs, and their limbs bend unnaturally when walking. Their limbs are much longer than those of a normal deer. Many accounts describe an uneasy feeling when encountering one of these creatures, since unlike normal deer, they aren't afraid of humans, and seem to possess an intelligence that shouldn't be there. The gnawed deer may stand up on its hind legs in an effort to intimidate those who encounter it. Despite the uneasy feeling when encountering one of them, they don't seem to attack unprovoked. One of the more popular accounts comes from a Reddit user who goes by the name Gris. Gris lived in Waynesboro, Virginia for about 5 years, and used to take bike rides along Skyline Drive during the day. One night, while unable to sleep, he decided to ride up to the first overlook on Skyline, only a mile inside the park. When he got there, it was pitch black, so Gris decided to stop his bike, being overtaken by a feeling of uneasiness. Gris reassured himself that there was nothing there other than wildlife. He was equipped with a .44 Magnum revolver, which calmed his uneasiness a bit. Gris sat in the dark, leaning on his bike for a while, looking at the valley below. About 10 minutes in, he felt the hair on his neck rise, as if he could feel someone watching him. The overlook was a sheer drop, so he wasn't concerned about anything popping out from that direction, but the mountainside and untamed woods were behind him, so anything could have emerged from there. Gris sat for about 10 more minutes, his anxiety growing worse and worse. Since the feeling wasn't going away, he hopped on his bike and decided to leave, riding off towards the gate. While driving slowly and keeping an eye out for wildlife, he saw something. Gris described it as looking like a deer that someone who had never seen a deer might draw, based on it being described to them. It stood on the mountainside, staring with huge eyes. The deer was enormous, and its body was extremely barrel-chested. Its legs were disproportionately long, and its head was almost bovine in shape. Not wanting to risk getting closer to the deer, and also not planning on traveling over 30 miles to reach the gate in the opposite direction, Gris decided to try scaring it off. He flashed his headlights, revved his engine, and honked his horn, but with no result. Finally, Gris got off his bike to look for something to throw near the deer to scare it away. As soon as he did, the deer stood up on its hind legs, causing Gris to freeze in place, hand on his gun. The deer took 2 jerky, unnatural steps towards the center of the lane on 2 legs, then froze again, staring directly at Gris. It suddenly shook its head wildly, like a dog with a toy, took another short step, and hopped on two legs several times before disappearing into the darkness. Grizz then quickly left the area. Many other people have reported encountering not deer with similar descriptions. One possible explanation for not deer is that witnesses encountered deer suffering from the early stages of chronic wasting disease, also known as zombie deer syndrome. The first sign of CWD is difficulty moving, followed by behavioral changes such as listlessness, tremors, and nervousness. Many deer suffering from CWD also seem to lose their fear of humans and appear confused. Forest mimics. There are many stories about strange, unseen creatures in the woods, capable of mimicking the sounds of nearly any animal, or even the sound of humans. Some accounts describe strange noises originating from the woods, seemingly normal animal calls, like that of an owl. To inexperienced listeners, these sounds may seem almost ordinary, but to those familiar with wooded areas, something feels slightly off, as though someone, or something, is imitating the animal call. Other stories involve people venturing into the woods and hearing the voices of their friends, family, or loved ones who had just gone into the forest. The voices call out to them, but when they return, the loved ones claim they never spoke. Other times the mimics take on the sounds of long-dead relatives or friends, beckoning them into the depths of the forest. These mimics can also take on the sounds of people in distress, such as cries for help, or blood-curdling screams. However, there is often something unsettling about the nature or tone of the voice, something almost inhuman. One more similar urban legend is that of the crying baby in the woods. A man hears the panicked cries of a baby coming from the forest, and feeling compelled to help, he rushes toward the source of the sound. However, as he approaches, something doesn't feel right. After stopping and listening for a while, he realizes that the cries sound off, as if they're being repeated. In horror, he realizes the cries are on a loop, and he quickly leaves the woods, with the realization that the sounds are most likely a recording intended to lure travelers into the forest for unknown and potentially sinister reasons. The Shrieks of Forest Grove. The Forest Grove sound is an unexplained noise that plagued the residents of Forest Grove, Oregon, starting in February 2016. The sound was described by several people as resembling a giant, off-pitch flute, car brakes, a steam whistle, or a tea kettle. The sound could last anywhere from 10 seconds to several minutes. Sometimes it was continuous, while other times it came in short bursts. Several theories were proposed to explain the sound. Some believed it was caused by a gas leak or a faulty valve. However, a representative from a local gas company claimed that they had investigated their pipes and found no leaks. Others theorized that the sound originated from frogs or a residential wind turbine, while some even suggested more outlandish theories, such as it being a Bigfoot mating call, UFOs, or secret government mind-controlled frequencies. Andrew Doss, a physics professor at Pacific University, created a crowdsourced map where people could drop pins to mark the locations and times they heard the sound, in an attempt to pinpoint its origins. However, the sound was so diffuse that it was impossible to identify its exact source. On February 27, the last pin was placed on Dawes' map, and the sound was never heard again. According to one article, the noise ceased after the local police department issued a light warning, stating that if the sound was man-made, the person responsible would face legal repercussions. This led many to believe that the sound was a prank, while others speculated that the most possible explanation was a leaky or faulty gas pipe. A similar unexplained story is that of the groaning tree of Badsley. According to local legend, around 1750, a local villager in the town of Bansley in Hampshire, England, frequently heard a sound resembling a person in extreme agony coming from behind his house. After investigating, he discovered that the sound was coming from an elm tree. As the story spread, the tree became a local celebrity, with travelers coming from far and wide to listen to its intermittent, unexplained groaning. The groaning continued for 18 to 20 months. Various explanations, both supernatural and scientific, were offered, but no conclusive reason for these sounds was found. The groaning stopped after the tree's owner bored a hole in its trunk in an attempt to discover the cause. The tree was later uprooted, but no explanation could be found for the strange sound. Church in the Woods. On the Let's Not Meet subreddit, a user made a post titled, Church in the Woods. Opie grew up in Ohio in the 70s, and he and his childhood friend Joe were outside all the time. Joe lived on a farm that bordered a pretty big forest, where along with Opie, they would spend their whole weekends. In high school, Opie and Joe would walk along the railroad tracks out in the country, finding beautiful rivers, discovering bridges no one went to, and camping in the woods near the tracks. After high school, they both went their separate ways, but stayed in touch. One summer in the mid-90s, they were both in town for the week. One night, while reminiscing about the old days, Opie and Joe decided to walk the old railroad tracks and camp for the night, just like they used to. They started out in the early morning, but instead of walking the usual route, Joe suggested they walk in the opposite direction. They both knew the area well and had a map, so they weren't all that worried, and they set off. The day went fine, and before night started to set in, they picked a spot to camp. They decided to scout the perimeter to make sure they weren't trespassing on anyone's yard. They climbed to the top of a small hill and looked around. When they did, they saw a small building about 100 yards into the woods, barely visible. They both thought it was a sugar shack, since there didn't appear to be a clear road into it. There was no movement or any lights around the building, so Opie and Joe decided to take a closer look. When they neared the building, they found that it was a church, not a sugar shack. The church looked like it had been abandoned for years. The wooden planks were almost black from rust and rot, and there didn't seem to be any glass in the windows, only open doorways. There was no sign of anyone having been in the church, no footprints, no paths and no roads. Opie and Joe left immediately since they felt uneasy about finding a church in the middle of the woods. They set up their hammocks, and as night began to fall, they started hearing something. It sounded like people singing. They both slid out of their hammocks, trying to make out the singing. Finally, they decided to creep back up the hill to get a better look. From the top of the hill, they saw lights coming from the church, and the singing seemed to be coming from there. The light looked like candlelight, and the singing sounded like church music, but in a foreign language. There were also occasional shadows moving inside the church. The singing continued for a bit, before it stopped, and a booming male voice began to chant, which thoroughly frightened Opie. He described it as sounding like some Old Testament preacher from the movies. Eventually, the male voice would say something, and a bunch of voices would answer in song, until they broke into a long, sustained wail, which lasted for a while. Then it stopped. Just as Opie was about to leave, Joe patted his shoulder and told him, "They're coming out." They were far enough away that they couldn't make them out clearly, but they could see a line of figures walking out of the open doorway, all holding hands in a single file. As the figures seemed to be approaching the hill they were on, Opie and Joe decided to rush out of there and go back to where they originally came from. Clapham Woods phenomenon. Clapham Woods, located in West Sussex, England, is a woodland area plagued by strange sightings and unusual phenomena. It's primarily known as a hotspot for UFO sightings and alleged occult activity. One of the first rumored reports of UFO activity in the area allegedly dates back to the 18th century, when a woman claimed to have seen a bright round shape, similar to the full moon, floating down into the woods before disappearing into the bushes. Following the sighting, the woods were filled with a foul-smelling smoke, and the woman who witnessed the UFO was allegedly smitten with palsy. In 1967, two schoolboys, Toy Newton and John Arnold, were playing with a Ouija board when the board began forming unusual stories about Clapham Woods. The board suggested that the woods were used as a base by extraterrestrial UFOs to collect Earth chemicals, particularly sulfur. From 1970 to 1980, UFO sightings in Clapham increased dramatically, with people visiting the woods in hopes of glimpsing a flying saucer. Some reports claimed that beams of light descended from the UFOs, and local ufologist Paul Glover reported encountering a boomerang-shaped UFO while walking with a friend through the woods in 1967. The craft moved quickly but silently, and throughout the evening, they allegedly saw 6 UFOs. In addition to UFO sightings, dogs have been reported missing in the area as early as the 1970s. Several people have also disappeared in the forest, with 4 being found dead over the years. In 1972, Police Constable Peter Goldsmith's body was discovered in a bramble in the woods, 6 months after he went missing. In 1975, the body of pensioner Leon Foster was found, and in 1978, that of Reverend Harry N. Smelling was discovered in the forest. These deaths, along with the disappearances of dogs, have been linked to a local cult known as the Friends of Hecate, with Hecate being the Greco-Roman goddess of witchcraft and crossroads. In 1986, a book was published by the title of The Demonic Connection, in which the author alleged contact with the cult. A member of the cult claimed that the cult met deep in the woods for black magic rituals, abducting dogs, believed to be a favorite of Hecate, for sacrificial purposes in order to gain her favor, along with other animals. The book also hinted that several high-ranking individuals were part of the cult, and that humans were occasionally sacrificed. Despite the book's release and the speculation about the demonic cult, many people believe the author was the victim of a hoax or practical joke, and that the cult's existence was exaggerated or fabricated, as there is no solid evidence to support the claims. Additionally, the disappearances and bodies found in the woods display no clear evidence of foul play. Pacific Northwest hunting. A user on 4chan alleged that he had heard rumors about human hunting occurring in the Pacific Northwest, and how there are human poachers in the Oregon and Washington area. While only rumors, there have been many historical incidents of this happening in various places around the world. There's also the case of serial killer Robert Hansen, who was active between the 70s and 80s. Robert would abduct female victims and release them into the Alaskan wilderness before hunting them down. Deogen. The Deogen is a creature or spirit said to haunt Belgium's Sonian forest. It's described as a fog-like mist, either taking on a vaguely humanoid shape, or with large black eyes staring out from within the greenish fog. The mist is often accompanied by smaller black figures. These figures are usually encountered darting across roads, causing drivers to veer off course. As the mist dissipates, the sound of children's laughter is said to echo in the distance. Occasionally, this is followed by bloody handprints appearing on car windows, only to vanish mysteriously. According to one tale, the legend of the Deogen and its eerie appearance began when the charred bodies of children were discovered in the Sonian forest. Allegedly, these children were murdered before their bodies were scattered and set on fire throughout the forest. Government deal with aliens. On February 20th, 1954, the 34th President of the United States, Dwight D. Eisenhower, was on vacation in Palm Springs, California, when he mysteriously went missing one evening. He only reappeared the next morning at a church service. Many theories regarding his disappearance emerged, with many suggesting that he had secret meetings with extraterrestrials during the time he was officially listed as missing. Timothy Good, a former U.S. Congress and Pentagon consultant, claims that Eisenhower met with extraterrestrials on 3 separate occasions at a remote Air Force base in New Mexico, where many witnesses were present. Speaking on Frank Sinner's opinionated show on BBC Two, Good stated the following: "Well, certainly I can tell you that in 1954, President Eisenhower had 3 encounters, set up meetings with aliens, which took place at certain Air Force bases including Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico." Philip Schneider, a geologist and structural engineer for the U.S. government, also spoke out on Eisenhower's meetings with aliens. While speaking at a conference in 1995, Schneider claimed that in 1954, Eisenhower made an agreement with 3 species of aliens in exchange for their technology. Eisenhower allegedly gave permission to extraterrestrials to abduct a limited number of human beings for experimentation on Earth and in space, in exchange for advanced technology. One conspiracy theory claims that many of these alien abductions occur in national parks, which could explain the large amount of people who go missing in national parks each year, with no explanation. However, there's no concrete evidence to support either theory,